We have two lovely cats. Like most cats, like to scratch things. But they've been very good cats in that they use the things that we've given them to scratch, and they, for the most part, they stay away from our furniture. One thing that they have is an inclined cardboard scratching pad, which I didn't even know existed until recently, but they really like scratching it. The one little issue is that the cardboard pad is replaceable, but the holder for it is just a sort of a cardboard box wedge thing, which isn't really all that nice. So we thought it'd be kind of nice to make a wooden version of this wedge holder, just so they sort of sit as a nicer piece of furniture in the house. So I did a quick little sketch of the dimensions I would need. I thought about what wood to use, and I've been using this red alder tree recently, as the wood is now dry enough to use. So I found a slab in the carport, and I carried that out to the shop. So the idea I had in making this wedge was to make a mitered box out of the wood, then make that box tall enough that I could cut it in half at an angle and get two scratch pad holders out of the build. Once I cut that sort of tube or box in half, I could put a frame into the cut end to hold up the cardboard scratch pad. So I started to cut the slab that I had found. Now it's a nice piece. It isn't huge, and it does have a bunch of knots in it. So I didn't feel too bad about cutting it down into smaller pieces. I started by cutting the length down with the circular saw, mostly so I could get it manageable on the bandsaw. So I cut one straight side on the bandsaw. Then I could set up the fence, and I needed material that was about 13 inches wide. So I set up the fence for that, and I cut a second parallel side. Then I jointed one face. As the piece is wider than my joiner, I had to do the little move where you joint one side and then flip it around and joint the other side. And if you go back and forth from side to side, you can actually flatten a face wider than your jointer, which is kind of nice. And it worked pretty well. Then I can resaw that piece on the bandsaw and plane the two halves. The red alder material is ready. What I thought I would do is a move I've made before, is to cover the knots with inlays on the CNC. So I found a piece of walnut I could use for that, and I drew up a cat paw that I could use to cover the knots with. And as that's cutting, there's a great promo over at the Maker's Mob. I am excited to announce our biggest deal of 2022, the 99-cent Maker's Mob woodworking sale. But it does end on Sunday, June 19th. This is our biggest woodworking sale of the year, where inside the Maker's Mob, you will not only get access to learn how to make some of my top woodworking projects, you will also get over 90 woodworking tutorials with plans from YouTube's top makers. And right now, if you click on the link in the description below, we are also hosting a 2-month router bit challenge where you can upload your projects that you have made and compete with woodworkers at different skill levels in order to win thousands of dollars in prizes from CMT Tools and Taylor Toolworks. So click the link in the description below, learn woodworking from YouTube's top makers, and take advantage of this 99-cent sale. It ends in just a few days. The cat paw that I had drawn up had a palm and then separate fingers. So I cut it where I didn't cut all the way through the walnut, and I could cut these pieces out, keeping the palm and the fingers together. So I could put those into the red alder as one piece. This would make keeping track of all the fingers and the glue up much simpler. So I could carefully cut out all of the paws on the bandsaw. I suppose I could have run another pass on the CNC and cut the outline of the paws all the way through. This really wasn't too hard doing it this way. This gave me an invisible cat in the shop. Of course, likes to knock things on the floor. You can see where the paws are going to cover the knots. I figured out at this point too that the paw graphic really wasn't the best thing for covering up anything because it's not a solid form. Now I can cut out the negative spaces in the red alder and get the paws to fit, and it worked. Then it's just a matter of cutting out all the paws. There was one spot on the edge of one side where there was sort of a big long knot, and I needed a different kind of shape. So I enlarged one of my cat faces and cropped off just the ears, and I made that a piece that would cover up that big long knot on the edge of the main box. So this is cutting out the space for that piece. I probably should have used a 1/2-inch bit instead of a 1/4-inch bit, but it worked. It just took a little while. Then it's just a matter of gluing everything together. I thought I was going to have to clamp this in place, but it fit nicely and just stayed in place on its own. Then I was just gluing the paws in, just getting glue in, and then just tapping the walnut piece in place. Then I drew sort of a circular shape just to do a pass over the top of the inlays to flatten everything out. Then I take that off. I cleaned up the width and got it closer, I think pretty much to the final dimension. Then I did a light pass in the joiner just to get rid of the machine marks from the CNC. I figured running it quickly over the joiner would be faster than trying to sand. I got a nice blade from CMT Tools. It's a cross-cutting blade. I almost put it in backwards, but I caught that. It's really a blade, I think, that would go on a miter saw or even a radial arm saw. It works in the table saw as well. But it really is a very specific cross-cutting blade. So I'm hoping to get really nice cross-cuts. It'll be good for cutting segments and triangles and all of that kind of stuff. I want to cut the miters for the box with this. So I'm going to angle the blade at 45 degrees. And I can get a sled for cutting that angle on the table saw. And I can get my red alder pieces in place. The first cut, it burned, and I was a little nervous about that because this is a brand new sharp blade. It really shouldn't be doing that. But I figured out that my little outfeed strip between the table saws is just a little bit higher than the surface of the table saw. And it was pushing the sled up just the tiniest little bit. And it was causing the blade to burn the cut because it's at an angle. So once I got that outfeed taken away and the sled ran nice and flat, then the cut didn't burn. I also put a piece in place to support the offcuts, which it also desperately needed. Once I got all that set up, the blade worked marvelously. It cuts a beautiful, no tear out cut, but it is very sensitive to its movement through the wood, I guess. As part of the Maker Mob Router Bit Challenge, we have partnered with Taylor Tools and CMT to offer the award-winning Italian-made CMT router bits and saw blades. CMT has the widest portfolio of router bits and saw blades on the market and receives a perfect 10 by Wood Magazine. Taylor Toolworks carries the largest selection and has the best prices on CMT bits and blades. You can save 30 to 50% off on the bits and blades I have used in this video by shopping at taytools.com. Link in the description below. In addition, use code CMT10 at checkout to save an extra 10%. Then I had my 4 sides cut. They had to be a very precise dimension so that the cardboard insert would fit. I made sure the width worked. That was really what was important at this point. Then I can glue the miters together. Use the band clamp to hold everything together. This seemed to work pretty well. Then I can make the blade 90 degrees again. This is the same cross-cutting blade, and it cuts plywood really nicely too. I cut up some scrap pieces of plywood to attach temporarily to the ends of the box. And we'll see what this is for in just a minute. Where I'm putting the screws in will be the bottom of the final piece, so I'm not too worried about the holes being there. I can flush trim the plywood as my flush trimming bit was still in the shaper. And I can switch out to a round over bit from CMT Tools. And I want to round over everything that cats might touch on this piece. So I'm going to round over the corners, sort of take that miter down just a little bit. I started this project thinking I would do dovetails at the corners. Then I was thinking, well, I should really do something on the CNC machine, and I had sort of done that recently. What I came up with was to just simply miter the corners to start, then do an inlay on the corners on the CNC machine. So I scaled the cat head silhouette that I have. I cut those out of walnut, a nice thick piece of walnut. So these are 1 inch deep. Then I can free them up on the bandsaw, just like before. I think I had 10, and I nicked one of them with the blade, so I really couldn't use that one. I really only needed 8, so I had 1 extra.
Bed goes up.
Then the idea is to clamp the box to my adjustable table on the CNC machine and make the negative for the inlay on the corner at 45 degrees. I clamped a scrap piece to the bottom of the table so the box would fall in the same place every time I did each corner. And it would hold the box in place while I was putting the clamps on. Trying to do this with the box sliding off, trying to put clamps in place really wouldn't have worked. Then I can set the router bit right on the corner, and I can cut out the inlay. So it works again like the inlays of the paws, and hopefully it helps a little bit with the strength of the joint. Now it's not nearly as strong as a dovetail would be, but it's not a drawer or something that's going to be pulled on every day, so it doesn't really need to be that strong. It's more decorative than anything. So once I had the corners cut, I could put the walnut pieces in. I was thinking I was going to have to figure out how to clamp these in place, and I had this idea of cutting a 45-degree strip and clamping that to the side of the box and then using that to clamp against. It ended up where I could just sort of tap these in place and they seemed to stay in just fine, so that made it a lot easier. I could take my scrap pieces of plywood off. So these were here just to give the box some strength while I clamped it to the table on the CNC machine. And I can cut the extra bits of the cat walnut pieces off. Then sand all of those flush with the box. This is sort of the wood turning part of this project. The sort of cutting off all the parts that I don't want. And I can round over the inlays on the shaper. Then the big moment of truth is to cut this box in half and get the two pieces that become the two cat scratcher holders. So I drew a line on the side of the box and then just cut it in half on the bandsaw. Then I could clean up that surface on the disc sander, get it nice and flat. I made the height a little bit more than I needed so I could have some play in that cut. Then I could round over the two parallel sides. Then I used the disc sander to make the round over on the two ends, because I didn't quite see how I was going to be able to do that with the round over bit. Now that the boxes are done, I can make the frame that sits inside the top of each box. So I found some more scrap pieces of the same red alder tree, and I cut those down to some strips that I could use. And I was going to basically make a sort of a rail and style door as a frame. So 2 long pieces and then 3 short pieces. And I laid out where everything was going to go. And I can get out the pantarouter to do the actual joints. The bit set I have from CMT has a 1/4 inch bit, just a flat, straight 1/4 inch bit. So I could put that in the router, and that will allow me to make the mortise and tenons. I can do the mortises first, and I'll do those along the long piece. And once it's all set up, it goes pretty fast. Everything just kind of falls into place. Then I can do the tenons, and I'll just do a tenon on each end of these short pieces. And I can use the same bit for both the mortise and tenons. And with a little bit of care, I can get a nice cut. Then all the pieces just go together. It's just a matter of putting glue in the mortises and clamping everything together. And then I have sort of a frame, which is kind of nice. Then I sanded the boxes, as there were still mill marks and router bit marks and a few things to sort of clean up. Originally, I was going to make 2 frames, one for each box, but I had this scrap piece that was sort of a part I was making that I realized I wasn't going to need. And the paw cutout I had forgot to mirror, so I had kind of screwed up what I had cut right in the middle of the piece of wood. So I thought I'd do one as the frame and one as this more solid piece. So I cut those to the width that they would need to be to fit within the box. And with some trial and error, I got it close. Then I wanted to cut the angle on the ends so that they would fit with the ends nicely. So I figured out that angle was 67 degrees. And I could set the saw blade at that angle and cut that angle into the ends of the panels. What's kind of nice is because both of the boxes are cut from the same box, they're both exactly the same. So I could cut the 2 pieces that fit within the box exactly the same way. So doing the 2 really wasn't any harder than doing 1. So I put the frame in the box and I put the cardboard flush where I wanted it with the top. Then I could mark the bottom of the frame, and I'll attach 2 stops to the inside of the box that'll hold the frame. And I can do that with screws. This will allow me to make this adjustable if I need it to be adjustable, either right now or in the future. And then once I did 1, I could just set my gauge to that depth and I could do the other side. I did both boxes this way. And I can put the stop on the other side in. Then the frame will just sit on those stops. The very last piece I wanted to make was a sort of filler piece at the top and the bottom. And this will fill in the gap between the box and the cardboard at the top and bottom. And it will also hold the frame down and in place. So I won't actually have any screws or glue or any kind of attachment on the frame. And I made this by making a single strip and then cutting that angle in the middle and getting the two sides. Sort of a metaphor for the whole project, where I'm cutting something in half to get two of something. And I could cut those to the right length, and they would just go at the top and the bottom with the angle on the correct side. So I'd then get an angle that matched the ends of the cardboard. I'm hoping I can just have this be sort of a snug fit and not have it come out when the cats are scratching it. Then it's just a matter of finish. I decided on lacquer, as it dries really fast, and it's what I used on the other cat things, so they're sort of used to the smell, I'm hoping. And it looks nice. And these don't need a huge amount of durability. And I'll let them dry. And I brought them inside, and I forced the cat on them. So this is Cinnamon. And I found she tends to use these cat scratchers more than Waffles, the other cat. Waffles uses the scratching posts more. And Cinnamon likes to use it upside down, which is really funny. Or at least me as a human, I think it's backwards. To her, it's probably correct. The new smell didn't seem to bother her. Then she got a little bored with it. Then I actually managed to catch Waffles using it. I think she was curious, and she seems to like it too. Thanks for watching.